We are seeing a lot of table views. Over the last 2 weeks, we've been doing table views, but today we'll actually introduce editing table views. Like I have data on my table view, I want to delete that particular row. We'll see what deleting looks like. We'll see what inserting looks like, insert a new item in my table view. And we'll also see reordering items in a table view, what that looks like, right? In that particular UI here, for example, if I want to move birthday party down below Unit 2 assessment, I could reorder it. I could reorder my cells and my rows, right? So this is what we'll be doing today. In today's lecture, modifying a table view, inserting, deleting, reordering a table view. Our demo app will be called Scheduler. So let's go ahead, let's go to Xcode and create a new application. So Xcode, new project. It's a single view application. And the name of our app will be called Scheduler. Language Swift, UI is storyboard. No test for now. So again, the app name is Scheduler. Great, let's go ahead, create project. I'll save it on my desktop. I'll remove Git for now. Create. What's that? I'm sorry? Cool, so this is our UI. Let's go work on our UI. What does our UI look like? Our UI will start off with a basic table view. We'll have two UI bar button items. We'll have an edit bar button item, and we'll have an add bar button item. We'll start off with having an add bar button item, and as we get to editing, we'll add the edit button later. But for now, we'll only add an add button. And when we click on the add button, so far we've seen a push segue, right? We've seen a push segue, you in a navigation bar, you push, you get the back button. In this particular segue, we'll use what's called a modal presentation. A modal presentation is when you get that slide effect. As opposed to pushing a view onto the screen, sliding from left to right, a modal presentation slides up. It slides a new view vertically on screen. So we'll see what modal presentation looks like. Right? Modally, it's going to present a view sliding from the bottom up onto your existing view. So I have view 1, I say segue, view 2 comes, and it modally presents itself sliding from the bottom up towards the top of the device. And with iOS 13, it's actually a nicer modal presentation. You guys got a lot of niceties, by the way. iOS 13 developers. Because now we do not have to include any button to dismiss. I could simply slide down my modal view and it dismisses. Before the modal view took up the entire device. And you as a developer, you had to add in some dismiss button so that the user clicks dismiss. Cool? Okay? But this is iOS 13 only, right? So if you're doing some app for iOS 12, modal presentation is different. It takes up the entire screen on an iPhone device. Right? You don't get the screen partially hidden, which we'll see. We'll see what it looks like in code. But this is what our UI looks like. So let's start off with a table view and one UI bar button item, and it's going to be an add image from SF symbols. Let's go ahead. So we have our view here. We'll embed our view in a navigation controller. We'll edit the title of our view to say schedule. Okay. So far, so good. And we'll add, let's make large titles. We like large titles, right? Do you guys like large titles? No? Don't prefer for it? Either or, doesn't matter. All right, so we have large titles here. And let's go ahead and add a UI bar button item. How do I add a UI bar button item? I click on my object library and I search for bar item. So I type in bar item. well, not tab bar, sorry. Type in UI bar. It's a bar button item. Bar button item. I drag in a bar button item over to the right side of my, interesting. Really interesting. Okay, so here I have my bar button item. I go to image. I go to image and I start typing in add. If you start typing in add in image, you see the plus SF symbol. Click on that, and we have a plus symbol. Great. Great, great, great. Cool. So far this is what our UI looks like. Let's run our app and make sure it renders correctly. So that's what we have for our UI so far. We have schedule, we have a plus icon, okay? Next step is when we click on that plus icon, we should have a modal presentation, a next view sliding in from the bottom up, right? And that's where we'll have our date picker, okay? So as we add in a schedule, that's where we add the schedule, or where we create the schedule. So let's first have a table view. So let's get a table view from our object library. The table view will list all our schedules for the day or the week or the month, whatever it is. So drag in the table view. Let's set the constraints for it. Please remember to set your constraints for your table view. The table view doesn't automatically set its constraints. So don't forget to set constraints for your table view. So for here, we'll set the constraints for it. It's going to be 0 at the bottom of my bar, 0 to the leading of my superview, 0 to the trailing of my superview, and 0 from the bottom of my superview. I say add for constraints. And at this point, I'll add my prototype cells. I'll go to prototype cells, and I'll increase the number from 0 to 1. I click on my prototype cell. Let's see, what type of cell do we have? What type of cell is this? Majid, what type of cell? What's the cell type, style? Where it says birthday party and it shows the time at the bottom. What's the cell style name? What's that? Do me a favor, Google UI table view cell, right? And let me know what cell style this is.
Sorry, for the plus button, did you change
the image to plus image, plus subtitle, right? Very good. So Majid says our cell will be a subtitle style cell. Everybody agree? Okay, cool. So let's go back to it. Click on our cell. Our reuse identifier. Our reuse identifier, we'll call it the schedule cell. Event cell. Event cell is a better name. So event cell, press enter. And right here where it says style, according to Majid, she says the style will be subtitle. Again, please remember we have 4 styles built into iOS. We are not creating a custom cell. Those are built in. We have 4 cell types. We have basic, we have right detail, left detail, and subtitle. So click on subtitle. And there we have a subtitle. It comes with a title and a subtitle text label. And we give it an identifier. Don't forget to give it an identifier. We call it event cell. Great. Let's keep going here. Let's drag in a new view controller. Drag in a new view controller, position it right above our existing view controller. Me positioning it over the view controller doesn't affect the way it segues. Everybody with me? I'm positioning it visually so it looks like what we're trying to achieve. But me positioning this view controller above doesn't affect the way it segues. Everybody with me? The way it segues is what connection we added, what segue we added. That's what affects it. Okay? So I will click on my add button. I'll control drag over to my new view controller. Do we see present modally? Right? Before we've done show. Again, show pushes. It pushes a view laterally. So laterally, a view slides in. Right? From left to right, a view slides in. Modal presentation, the view slides up. Right? From the home button, it slides over our current view. This is called modal presentation. So this here is presented modally. Okay? It doesn't change like prepare for segue or anything like that. It's just a transition. It's just a transition.
It's just literally just an animation.
An animation, a transition. It's the way it transitions. Does it transition from left to right or bottom up? Right? The animation, that's a different thing we could also change. Right? That's presentation modes. Like, do you want it to flip as it transitions? There's a lot of things you could do there. That's where the animation comes in. So present modally, click on that. Was there a next hand up? Okay, so again, this is really beautiful in iOS 13, right? This is new stuff in iOS 13, where it shows you, it partially hides the device. It doesn't hide the entire device. Pre-iOS 13, it hides the entire device. It's like a new view over the entire screen. And the user cannot do anything but click on the dismiss if they want to dismiss that view. Everybody with me? But new to iOS 13, you slide down and the thing is out. It's a beautiful thing, right? It's like magic. Okay, cool. So we have our view. Let's test it out, actually. Let's run it. I'm sorry? Well, if you have an app, you should have updated it to iOS 13 already with the features. But if it's less than iOS 13, it doesn't have that presentation. It takes up the entire device. Okay?
Does that mean that if you create an app with the and it's on a, like when it comes on a device that doesn't have it, will it just go default?
If it's pre-iOS 13, you won't get where it presents it, but it will take the entire screen. So the developer has to have a dismiss button or something to dismiss that view. Okay. But with us here, everybody got their view up? So if I click on the add button, look at that. And all I have to do is slide down. Again, that's iOS 13, okay? So beautiful, right, Mr. Antonio? Amazing. Feel the enthusiasm, right? Eric, you had a question?
Is that the only way to make that occur? Is that the only way for that to happen? Like, is there another way you can make it slide up?
You could do other things in code. As we go more into animations, we'll see how to do stuff without segueing, for example. But you must have some sort of transition segue anyway, because you have to pass some data. But as far as like the transition, you could change it in code. You could change it in Interface Builder as well, right? But those are the defaults you get. What I'm talking about right now, you get it for free, right? Being able to do that, like slide down, you would have to do it in code pre-iOS 13, right? Have some sort of pan gesture where the user slides down, have some code there that you write. But now this is shipped out of the box. The user is able to slide down and dismiss the view. Okay? For the presentation modally option. Okay? So whatever segues, I could click on the cell and present modally. Right? But what we're showing right now, the modal presentation itself, the transition or how the user is able to dismiss it, it's new in iOS 13. But it doesn't matter where you segue it or what that action is. What triggers that action, it doesn't matter. All right, so we have our table view, which is pretty much empty right now. We're able to have a new view, which we'll have our date picker here, right? So we need to add content here and pass that content back to our table view. That back that I spoke about, how do we pass information back? Unwind, segue. Excellent, developers. All right, cool. So let's keep building UI. What does our UI look like? This is our UI. So our UI, we have a text field. Why did I click on this? We have a text field, right, which is create event. That's the placeholder. We have a date picker, very similar to our date picker project, by the way, like a week ago or whatever. It's the same UI, minus the, I think we had one RSVP thing or something there. So a text field, a date picker, and a button. Okay, let's go ahead and add those. The date picker will be centered vertically and horizontally. That's it for constraints, okay? So go ahead and drag in a date picker. Date picker, center X, center Y. Center horizontally, center vertically. So I go to my object library, I search for date picker. I drag in a date picker object, I center it vertically and horizontally. I go to my align button. I go to my align button, I click on horizontally, I click on vertically, I click on add to constraints. Great, so I have 2 constraints, excellent. Next up, I need to get a text view. I need to get a text field, sorry. I need to get a text field here. Drag in my text field. I'll drag my lead-in to my margin. I'll drag my trailing. I'll drag my trailing to my margin. I'll drag my lead-in to my lead-in margin. This is my text field. I'll click on my text field and set the constraints for it. What does it look like? It's 20 to the lead-in, 20 to trailing, and 8 to the top of the date picker. So 8 points top of the date picker, 20 points lead-in of the super view, 20 points trailing of the super view. 3 constraints, and I add 3 constraints. Staying on my text field, I will click on it. I'll go to my attributes inspector. I'll add a placeholder text. My placeholder text will simply say create event. I'll press enter. I'll use my alignment buttons. I'll center align it. I'll center align my placeholder. I'll increase my system size text to say 24. What else do I want to change here? I think I want to change my capitalization. Right now it's none, but I'll capitalize words for now. What else do we want to do? Autocorrect? Do we want autocorrect on or off? Off? Okay. So autocorrect will turn off where it says correction. Turn that to no. Spell check. Do we want that on or off? Spell check will turn off. Keyboard type will keep by the default. Great. So this is it for now. If there's any modifications, we'll come back to it. Next up, we have a button called Create Event. So let's, I'm sorry? Okay. Yulia, you have a question? 24. But feel free to play fonts, right? Feel free to play fonts. You can make it a dynamic font by making a text style. You could put your own font on it. You could put a background color of the font. We just made the, we just set it to 24. Yeah. But I'm saying, like, feel free to use any font you want or color, background color. Okay, cool. So next up, let's get a button, a regular button. Get a button over, drag a button right below our date picker, and our button will be called Create Event. And the constraints for my button, add new constraints for my button. It's going to be 8 points from the bottom of my date picker. Add constraint, so 1 constraint. And the last constraint will be center horizontally. So center horizontally, add constraint. For the create event button?
Yes.
So it points from the bottom of the picker, one constraint, and then center it horizontally. So only two constraints. The button has a size. We don't have to set a width for it, or even a height, because it has contents, right, in it. Okay, so now we have our view laid out, right? This is good. Let's run it and see what we have. So here, if I click on my add button, I have my create event. I could click on it. I could type stuff in, right? But when I click on the return key, nothing happens, right? Nothing happens. We need to fix that because we need to get to our create event button. How do we fix that? How do I get access to my return key? Click return.
The should return.
Should return. Should return comes from what? All the questions. Get ready to answer those questions right after assessment. Where does should return come from? That's a good one. Maybe Antonio's going to write that one down. Where does should return come from? Where does should return come from? Delegate, right? The delegate for the UI text field. It has a method that's called text field should return. It gets called when the user clicks on the return key, right? Cool? So it comes from UI text field delegate. So before we even make a delegate, we need a view controller. Let's refactor the view controller's name here. What's a good name? Refactor. I'm refactoring the name of the view controller. Anybody has a name? Schedule list. I like it. Schedule list controller. Thank you, Mr. Sering. Great. So schedule list controller is the name of our first view controller. Chelsea, I'll take your name for the second view controller, the create event controller. I'll take that for the second one, where we actually create the event. So let's go ahead and create a new file, a new view controller. It's a Cocoa Touch class. And here we'll take Chelsea's name. We'll say create event controller. It's a subclass of UI view controller. And we click on next. And we create. Awesome. Command A, Control I to format my code. Command A, Control I to format my code. By the way, I'm using 2 spaces here for anybody who's interested. Right? You could change the preferences of how many spaces you have on Xcode. So when I click on a new line, it only creates 2 spaces. Right? By default, it has 4 spaces. So it's up to you what your preference is. Right? There's a big debate about that. It's very political. There's a lot of politics in coding, by the way. So get ready for it. Some people like 4 spaces, some people like 2 spaces, some people don't want a tab. There's a lot of politics. All right, so create event controller here. We're in the view did load, great, great, great. We said we needed to conform to UI text field delegate. Again, we're using an extension here because we want to separate our code, our logic up between the regular create event controllers methods here and our UI text field delegate methods. So create an extension on our create event controller, and we want to conform to UI text field delegate. Again, it doesn't have any there's no required methods as opposed to our UI table view data source, right? UI table view data source has 2 required methods. This particular protocol doesn't have any required methods, but we are interested in listening to when the user clicks on a return key. Right? When the user clicks on a return key, I want to get information about that. I want to know when they did it. When they did it is important to us. Why? We want to dismiss the keyboard, 1. 2, we want to create an event. Everybody with me? Okay, so that's why we're using our text field should return here. So I start typing in text field should return. So text field should return, I return true. It returns some Boolean value. Keep in mind, you could return true or false here, by the way. It's still gonna work. Just keep that in mind. The return true here basically affects like a text view or something else, where you wanna make that return key be something else. If they click on the return button, you probably wanna go to a new line. So keep in mind, right now, the use cases of true or false doesn't really affect our text field here, okay? What really affects our text field should return is what we do with the first responder. How do I dismiss the keyboard? Shania, I want to dismiss the keyboard. So here I have a comment, dismiss the keyboard. How do we do that? Because right now, when the user clicks on return, we want to dismiss the keyboard. It doesn't happen automatically here. We want to dismiss it. How do we do that? It's first responder, yes, but what do I do? Who's the first responder in this case? The text field is the first responder. Very good answer, right? So Shania says the text field is the first responder. Why? Because right now it is the one editing it's the one that brought up the keyboard. It brought up the keyboard. It's editing mode. It is the first responder, right? So as Shania says, if we want to dismiss the keyboard, we get access to the text field, right? And we say resign first responder. So that particular method there dismisses the keyboard on the text field. Cool? Great. What else do we need to do? Is that all? Is that enough to make the return key call this method? Will our code work as it is now? Will the keyboard dismiss? I see a finger saying no.
Well, we don't have.
Somebody else.
Oh, okay.
One finger wave is good. Somebody else got to say what that finger wave means. Hiding. Who's hiding? Tiffany, you're hiding. Will the code work? Will my return key dismiss the keyboard right now, as is? Yes, it will, right? So if I run my code and I put a breakpoint here, the breakpoint will get called, right? It should. Okay, let's test it out. You're in the second round of the interview. Your hiring manager is testing out your code and your hypothesis. I go to my text field. I edit some stuff here. I click on return. And now you're sweating. He gives you a chance. He's like, okay, I click on return. It's not working. What else is wrong? What am I missing at this point? He goes to the code. He says, you're missing something. He gives you one more chance. At this point, you could even Google.
You guys need to pay attention to this because you guys have been doing this for a little bit. And if I see something's in, I ain't helping.
You heard that? That's Mr. Nice Guy.
It's a simple.
At this point, I'm going to Google. My text field should return doesn't get called. That's what I'm going to Google. Google. Go ahead. Use Mr. Google. Right now, Tiffany is challenged. Thank you. So I'll Google. I'm stuck. I'll say my text field should return is not getting called.
Oh.
Is it because is the view controller connected to?
The hiring manager says, yes, it's connected. And he gives you a chance. He says Google. He says Google. He's really telling you to Google at this point and you're hesitating. That signals you are not taking a cue. Other people got it. Tiffany got to get it too.
You guys need to try too. Come on. You guys can do this other exam too.
You could literally type in text field should return does not get called. Text field should return does not get called. Somebody on Stack Overflow will give us some hint or something to say, did you forget to do this? Did you do that?
Oh, did we set the delegate?
Your hiring manager says, yes, You're resourceful. You're able to use the internet, right?
In the view below, you're supposed to set.
So set the view controller as the delegate, right? Everybody? As a delegate for the text field. So that we forgot to do. So here we have, by the way, guys, there's more parts of why this is not getting called.
Yeah.
Right?
But none of you said the delegate part, so.
But none of us got to the, well, eventually we did, right? But there's more moving parts here. But, right, be very careful. So here we have what we want to set. We don't have nothing to set yet. That's the next question, right? Did anybody not see that? We have nothing, we have no text field yet, right? Okay, so assuming you have a text field, let's have a text field now. IB outlet weak bar create. What's that? What did you say?
No, man, I got that.
Oh, all right. So create text field here. It's a UI text field. And now, don't forget to do this part. Very, very important. So create text field. You need to set the delegate. You need to set the delegate. Okay? Bring up your storyboard and let's connect it. So at this point, connect your text field. Do we have... Click on your view controller and make sure your identity has changed to create event controller. Click on your view controller with the date picker. Go to identity inspector and set the class to create event controller. Make sure you set the class to create event controller. Make sure you set the class to create event controller. You see why we emphasize practice, right? There's a lot of moving parts, right? There's a lot of moving parts with what we're doing right now. No matter how simple the app is, the one thing you want to do outside of anything, there's a lot of moving parts to it. You drag in a view controller, you have to set the class on it, right? There's a lot of moving parts. You have a delegate method, you have to set the delegate. Who's listening to that delegate? A lot of moving parts. So the more apps you do, whether it be in class, outside class, your own project, the more practice you get with, oh, I know what's wrong. Your reuse identifier is not set. As the app crashes, you know exactly what went wrong at that point, right? So the more practice we do, the better. So here we're gonna we'll just simply drag our text field over to our text field. We'll run our app and verify that our return key does indeed dismiss the keyboard. So I click on my add button. I add some event. I click on return and my keyboard dismisses, right? So if we do not have this return, if we do not have this delegate equals self, and I run my application, in viewed load, if I do not set my delegate, I get to my text field, the keyboard comes up, it will never dismiss. Okay? So very, very important. If you have a delegate, you should set your delegate. Not should, you're required to set your delegate. Yes, sir?
I'm sorry, I missed the part where we did the text field, the default text disappeared from the
Say that again. So when I bring up the,
yeah, so if you start typing,
if I start typing,
yeah.
oh, the autocorrect. I think we removed autocorrect and we removed spell check.
No, yeah.
Is that?
No.
Say that again, Christian.
No, there's an error that didn't use. That's what
I know you're saying things, but I'm not getting what you're saying.
We had created that as the default label. There, it's like,
Create event.
no, it was natural. It was natural.
It's not going to work because we commented it out.
Yeah, so I figured it out.
If I run it again and I click on return, it's going to work. Right? right? If I click on return now, it will dismiss the keyboard. Christian, anything else?
No, I got it.
Yes, sir.
You create an event, right? So this, and then you dismiss the controller and pull back up, it automatically creates the event, the text.
Oh, that's what he's talking about? I did not add anything for this. Is that what you're talking about? Like automatically clearing the text field?
Yeah.
We did not change anything. The only thing we changed was autocorrect, and let's go back to what we have here.
You made it a placeholder, that's why it disappears.
Let's go back to our attributes and make sure you have everything we have so far. For your placeholder, you have a create event, correct? Next up, what do we have? We said capitalization words, and we said correction no, and we said spell check no.
Yeah, it was literally the placeholder I put it in.
Okay. Or you put it in text.
Yeah.
Ah, yes. I feel like I need spell check though, or something. Anyway, we'll come back to it.
No, because if you're making an event.
It could be any name, right? Okay, all right. Chelsea defended her action there. All right, okay, let's keep going. Let's keep going. So for now, we could do things. We could say we could add something in. We could return the keyboard. Create event doesn't do anything. What should create event do? When I click on create event, what do we want to happen? Unwind segue. Very good, Luba. So when we click on create event, we want to unwind segue. Why? Because we want to now pass that data over to the previous view controller. Okay? So far, so good? That way we could update our table view. Right? Everybody got that? Right? So Luba says when I click on create event, I want to unwind segue back to my previous view controller and update my table view. Right? A lot of steps along the way there, but we'll get there. Okay, cool. So let's do a couple things. Where's the first place I should go? What should I do? You're tutoring somebody in 7.0, and you're teaching them unwind segue. Where do we start? Schedule list controller, Yulia says. Okay. We could literally look at our date picker demo and see all the steps. So Yulia says go to schedule list controller. Great. What next? We wrote like a whole paragraph, guys. 2 paragraphs. You guys are gonna tell me what to do. We write an IB action. Other people help out Yulia. Yulia is not doing it alone. I write an IB action. It's a function. What are we gonna call it? What's the name, Brendan? Give me a name for this function. Unwind event, okay. We'll go with that for now. Or update event. Or add event. Unwind event for now. Any other names? I feel like unwind event doesn't capture what this function is doing. New event. Add new event. Right? No, I'm taking everything that we're saying. You have event, you have everything, right? At the end of the day, when somebody comes to that function, they want to know what that function does. You see where I'm going with that? When we come over to your code, oh, what's that event? Oh, it's as a new event. Okay, I get it, right? But unwind segue or unwind event, right? What does that actually do? See what I'm saying? Maybe it changes the event back to a previous state. Cool? So like really try to make our functions stand out as far as like what they're doing. So add new event is great. What else am I missing? Let's go through our notes. Yes, sir?
The sender
The sender.
should be a UI button.
The sender should be a UI button. Is that what our notes have? UI storyboard, right? So Andy says we have a segue parameter, data type UI storyboard segue. Check the notes, right? So this is the most important part of this function. Having the parameter be of type UI storyboard segue. We have the notes, right? Make sure that you open in that date picker project as we're talking about it. Great. So at this point, when we click on our unwind, when we create our unwind in our second view controller, we'll be able to see our add event function. Everybody with me? Without having this UI storyboard segue as a parameter, you won't be able to see a function to connect to. Right? Very, very important. So at this point, we could actually go back to our storyboard and do the connection and come back and finish this method. So go to storyboard. Go to storyboard. Click on create event. Go to storyboard, click on create event. Control drag from create event over to our exit icon here. And at this point, we should see our add new event function. Do we all see that? Do we all see this add new event action? Yeah, to the exit icon. Yeah, the right one. Do we all see that before I continue? Majed? Majed? You need to talk to me so I know what's going on. Right? I'm here. So you go to your second view controller. You have a create button, correct? Do you have in your schedule list controller, do you have this method? Right? And you have segue, UI storyboard segue. Right? Go back to your storyboard. Right? Click on create event button. Control drag to the exit icon. Cool? As you let go, do you see an add new event segue? Very good. Talk to me. Tell me what's going on. Everybody else is good? Yes, sir.
I can't control the drag for some reason. I have the.
You have a button, right? Are we all able to access our add new event? Okay, click on it. Click on it. At this point, we've created a segue. We could go to our connections and see what connections we have. Where is my connection? Click on my exit button and go to my connections here. So to verify the connections you have, click on the exit icon. Click on the exit icon and go to your connections inspector. And there you see create event button is connected to add new event segue. So this is where you could delete the connection if you want. Everybody with me? Or verify that you do have the connection. For example, if it's not getting called, you could come here, verify that it's connected. Everybody with me? So I go to my exit icon and I go to my connections inspector and I verify, hey, my segue is connected. Cool? So the button is connected to the action in the previous view controller. This is what's happening. I have two view controllers. View controller number 2 button is connected to the IB action in view controller number 1. Yes, Ameni? No? Yes? Okay, cool. All right, so let's keep going here. Great, great, great. So at this point, let's go back to our schedule list controller. And simply, we're testing right now. Like, does this actually get called? So I'll put a print statement in here. By the way, print statements are referred to as caveman debugging. Right? So when you have print statements like we do here, that's considered caveman debugging.
What's the sophisticated?
At the end of the day, this really gets the job done. It's called caveman debugging, right? But it really gets the job done. Other things you could do, breakpoints. Right? Breakpoints, you could write test, right? You could have tests, you could have many things. You could have a UI test, you could have a unit test. But print statements at the end of the day, it gets the job done more often than not. You got me? In this case, the only thing we want to test, like, does this print statement get called? Does it say add event, add in event? Does this actually get called? Right? That's what we tested. Mr. One?
Oh.
Okay.
Couldn't you say that dumping is a better?
At the end of the day, it's still somewhat caveman debugging. And caveman debugging is not a bad thing. It's just referred to as caveman debugging. Okay? It's not a bad thing. But the only thing I'll suggest is when you submit in something, you don't submit code that says printing add an event. Like as a code submission, whether to us or to somebody else, if you tested something in development, do not submit something that says add an event, like a print statement. Remove that print statement from your final code submission. Yeah. But for your own development purposes, that's good. But like when you're submitting it to us or a job, don't put print statements there, right? Either you have, we'll see later, either you have like a UI alert controller giving the user some information or some feedback, but not print statements. We'll get into more of that. Any other questions? Okay. Yes?
Technically, the add new event is the button that is on
The second view controller.
the second view controller. So why is this action here?
It's unwinding. That's what we're saying. Unwinding means I have two view controllers for now. I could have three. I could go from 3 to 1. I have two view controllers right now. On my second view controller, the create event controller, Tiffany, I have a create button. When I click on that create button, I want to go back.
Right, but how do you then connect the button?
That's the unwind segue we just connected. We connected it. We went to storyboard. We clicked on the button. And we connected it to the exit icon, which gave us access to the IB action add new event.
Okay, and in that same, so is it in that function that if you wanted to save this
Yes.
event, that's what you do?
Exactly, which is the table view.
Okay.
Very good. Yeah.
What do you refer to the files as, I guess?
The files.
Like when I think of it in my head, like you write it in the view controller file of the one that.
You could say source, where this create event here is the source controller.
No, the file is like when you click view controller, like detail view controller or create event view controller. When I write notes, I'm like,
Which one?
photo view controller. Like the file. Yeah. So where am I typing that? Like if I'm saying I'm typing create event tentacle delegate in what? I'm not wording it right.
Okay, so the create event controller, you mean for the unwind segue part of it, or?
Yeah, like if you were explaining it to me, where would you say that I'm typing the create event, anything in there? What is that?
We have two view controllers,
Okay.
right? We have a source view controller, which is the first view controller, and we have a second view controller, which is the destination view controller. That's for prepare for segue, right? When you go in from A to B, we had prepare for segue.
Okay, so if
But for unwind segue, I'm going from a source view controller, meaning where I'm currently are with the create event button. Going back is the destination.
okay, say I'm typing in this right now. What am I typing in?
You type in the create event controller, where you're creating the event, where the date
So I
picker
just
is.
call it controller, not file, not anything. I'm just typing in controller.
Yes, where you're creating the event.
Okay. Okay.
We have two view controllers right now. If you want to write notes, you have the first view controller, which is where your table view is, right? This is the original view controller, or the home view controller, if you want to say that. You could call it home view controller, where you started. And where you go into when you click on the add button, that's where you actually create the event. You could say, I'm in the creating event controller, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that pretty much says what the controller is, right? That's where you're actually creating the event.
I just always called it something different, like the actual view controller itself is different from the file.
It depends on the context you're talking about. If you're talking about in the context of unwind segue, right? Where you're coming from would be where the create event button is, right? Where you're coming from.
Yeah.
And then where you're going to or going back to would be our schedule list controller, where you're going to. So I'm on the second view, I click on the create event, I'm going back to the create list controller. But basically, we have two controllers right now. One creates an event, and one shows the events.
That's fine.
All right, any other questions for clarification? Any other questions? Okay, let's keep going here. Where are we? So, I'm sorry, say that again?
Because you're on the create event controller, right?
Uh-huh.
You have all the information, like when you go to the store, in your create event controller is where you actually have the information to create the event, right?
We call this one create event controller, correct? That's where you actually create the event.
Exactly.
Right.
But then it's on our schedule list controller that when we, obviously when we press the button on the create event,
Uh-huh.
that because we're not doing anything on the create event is why we don't put it on that view controller, because technically when we create the button on, when we press the button on that view controller, we're going back to where the event is supposed to be listed.
Yes.
Okay, because that where it's listed is where whatever that button is supposed to do is going to show.
Exactly. Does that help you? What you just said? You basically reworded what you were thinking.
Yeah.
And what you're saying is what we're actually doing.
Yeah.
We have two view controllers. This top one creates the event,
Mm-hmm.
right? So we have an event name called whatever, lunch meeting. We give it a time. We click on create event. It creates the event. It passes it back to the previous view controller. And that's where we actually show the event we created. Yeah. But we're using unwind segue to pass that data back, right? Any other questions before we move on? Tanya, questions? Okay, cool. So let us keep going. I think we were just testing out, does add an event get printed? Let's actually run the app and see if that happens before we move on. So I click on my add button. My create event view controller comes up. I click on create event, and I have add an event getting printed. Everybody with me? So we know our unwind segue is working. Right? Everybody? Cool? So that part works. So we could remove that print statement here and continue working. So this schedule list controller, it has a table view controller. Let's create that. The table view controller will list all our created events. Chelsea, any questions? How is your writing coming along? Good? Okay. So here we have a table view. Table views. We need to create an extension here. We know where we're headed now. This is code we've been doing over the last 2 weeks. So here we want to conform to UI table view data source. Right? So again, as I said, everything we're doing is review. It has a review element in it. We're creating a table view again. We're going through cell for row again. We're going through number of rows again. Right? So here we have number of rows. And here we'll return 0 for now until we create our data. And we have cell for row. We'll use a generic cell here. We want to use a custom cell. So here we simply say table view dot dequeue reusable cell. I think we said event cell. No, we haven't created. We said event cell, right? Did we? Anybody?
Yeah.
Thank you. So we call it event cell. That was our identifier. And here we simply say return cell. Great. Okay, cool. So what's our data? What's our data? What is the data that drives this table view? Our data should be an array of events. Our data should be an array of events. Right? So we'll create an event object. We'll create an event model to encapsulate what an event has. Right? That's where if you're doing any project that's your project, we're not going to just create a string of events, we'll create an object. An object encapsulates real data, right? An event has a time, right? A date, right? An event has will attend, whatever it is, right? So here we'll take a step back and we'll create an event object. Everybody with me? So for Mr. Christian, you'll create that guitar object, right? I'm still waiting for your guitar app, right? So here I'll take a step back, I'll create a new file. Is it a CocoaTouch class? Is it a Swift file? I'm not hearing enough yeses. We're not subclassing anything. If you're subclassing something, you use CocoaTouch class, like some UI kit class. We're not subclassing any UI kit class. So it's a basic Swift file. So I click on Swift file, I go next, and for the file name, I call it event. For the file name, I call it event, and I click on create. Great. So it's a struct, it's an event has a date. We saw date object before. In our particular example, what does an event have? A date and a name for now. We could add more items later. So a date and a name. A name is a string. Cool. So we have an event object. We could build upon it later. We could have more objects in there. But basically, an event has a date, right? And an event has a name. Date of type date, name of type string. Let's go now back to our schedule list controller. And now we could create an array of events. Using our event type, we have an empty array. We'll use a property observer here. And on that property observer, anytime that event array gets changed, we'll call table view and we reload the data.
We just created the data.
Yeah. Actually, we're not going to create a property observer here on second thought. We'll just take out everything here. Different model, different structure. When we add an event, we're not going to reload the whole table view. We'll actually insert, okay? We're not going to reload all the data. We'll insert a value in the table view, okay? All right, different use cases, right? Different use cases for everything that we do. Here, we don't want to reload the table view every time we have a new event. All what we want to do is add the new event, right? Either we add a new event at the top of our table view or the bottom of our table view. It's up to us and our business logic. But we're not reloading the entire table view. No need for that in that particular case here. Great, so we have our table view, we have our events, and we are good. So here we have an event coming in. Let's get access to our create event controller. So get access or get a reference to the create event controller. So get a reference to the create event controller. Any ideas? How do we get a reference to it? Luba. I want to get a reference to the create event controller using the segue property. But right now we're here. We're in our add new event, IB action. I want to get a reference to my create event. I want to get an instance, a reference to an instance of my create event controller. Luba, you have the date picker project, correct?
I do, but I don't have it in front of me.
Open it and go
I
to,
just quit my Xcode and
is still running. Okay, who else wants to tell me how do I get a reference to the create event instance? Ameni? So I need the segue.source, but what else am I writing before that? Godlet, right? So Godlet, and we'll call it create event controller. And now Amini says segue. We have the segue property here, right? So on the segue, what am I using on the segue? What property am I after? Segue dot what? What's that? Dot source, right? Where am I coming from? Everybody with me? Segue dot source. Where am I coming from? In prepare for segue, you say segue dot destination. Where am I going to? Everybody with me? Two different things. Here we're interested in where we're coming from. Chelsea, that's what you could write there. Where am I coming from? Segue dot source. For your notes, right? That's what you're writing. Write your notes in code. What if the notebook just...
I need all three.
That guy's gonna get water, or a dog eats it, right? But your project, you could push it to GitHub, right? That notebook, we could try to push it to GitHub, right? But we're not there yet, as far as yes. Write your notes in code. So that, we did that project before, right? Almost, right? All the notes, we wrote 2 paragraphs of notes. Okay, so here, get a reference to the create event controller instance. So here we say segue.source. What else? What's the next thing? What else do I need? I need to typecast it, right, according to Andy. So here I'm going to typecast it to the type we expect, which is a create event controller. And here, if we do not get our create event controller, we have an error. So failed to access create event controller. Great. So we have the create event controller. Excellent. Our create event controller needs some object on it, which is an event, which I don't think we have yet. So let's go fix that. Are we still typing?
Now, and you created that controller class, we're gonna be creating an object for that.
And then that's what object we access. Very good.
Can you scroll up a little bit? I just want to make sure I'm not seeing anything.
So for people who are ahead, as Amini was pointing out, in our create event controller, we need an event object. Okay, that's what we create. So when I give it a name and when I give it a date and I click on return, I create the event there. Everybody with me? Okay. Okay, we're almost done with part 1 here. We're coming to an end of this first part. Are we still typing here? Are we still typing? We good? Julia, can I go on?
I'm still typing.
Okay, you can go ahead. So let us still type, and I'll stop the video here, and we'll continue after lunch.